Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Big Jiu-Jitsu Show, a member of the Podbros Podcast Network. Don't forget to go to podbros.com and find yourself another podcast you want to listen to. And don't forget to visit our sponsors, Trap and Roll Soap Company, Tape Armor, and Angry Joe Coffee. I'm Rob, and today I have a special guest with me. I have Mark Munster from Heavyweight BJJ talking to me, and I'd like to say one of the bigger guys in the jiu-jitsu community in more ways than one right now. He's putting out a lot of good stuff through his website, H3 BJJ, for the heavy guys, but also you said through Heroic Will, which I thought was something that really stuck with me when I was reading through everything. So, Mark, thanks for being on the show today, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying here. Geez, how much do I owe you? How much do I owe you for those nice words? Yeah, just to be clear, heavyweightbjj.com is the domain name, but I do call it HW3 Jiu-Jitsu. Stands for a couple things. Just first and foremost, hard work, heroic will, and then heavyweight legacy. And I guess without jumping into the details, unless you'd like me to, I could kind of give you an idea why I decided to name it that.
Yeah, we can go into that. I want to hear about how you got started in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or just martial arts in general. Then I'd love to hear about how you came up with those three things.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. Well, I was what I call a latchkey kid. And what that would be, I don't know if that's a term that your listeners would be familiar to, if you have a lot of young demos out there, but I'm 42 years old, so back when I was going to school, I'd help myself. I'd have to walk home, get the key out from under my doormat, get inside my house by myself, no parents home, and I was just a big pile of snacks. I would sit at home and eat, and by the time I was in 8th grade, I was upwards of 275. So I've always been a big guy, not in the best way. So I can remember sitting and watching different sporting events, and especially on Saturdays, they used to have Kung Fu Theater on TV. And if you were lucky enough, they'd show a Bruce Lee movie. So, of course, my first love of martial arts was watching Bruce Lee on TV. And I even remember, getting those Kung Fu, those catalogs that had some of the gear on it to purchase, and I was walking around town. I even got those stupid shoes with with your big toe on one side and the rest of your foot crammed in the other side, walking around town. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? And I thought, obviously, because it worked on the movies, that if I put those on, I could jump really high. But gravity doesn't work when you're 5'10" and you weigh 280 and you're literally just I was just obese. There's no nice way to say it. I was just a big kid. Didn't exercise, didn't know anything about anything. So, like anybody, my intro to martial arts was really kind of doing some of the karate classes at a nearby mall or a strip mall where they had local classes on weekends, and you go in there and you do some of the stuff, the katas, and you stand in the horse stance for half an hour and all that great stuff. And you think that's magic, and you wonder how it translates into the real world. And for me, it was always, does this stuff really work? That was kind of what piqued my interest. What really works out there. And by the time finally I decided to take control of my health. I don't know what it was. It was probably I started to lift weights. One summer I found a weight set in my cousin's apartment, and I decided to hit it. And that was my first love, I'd say, was lifting weights. It just transformed the way I felt. Started to transform my body. Lost weight pretty quick, and I just became addicted with the transformation it had over my body. So that took over for a while when I got to a normal weight, but I was still searching. I was thinking, well, this strength is great, but what can I do with it? I mean, if I ever got in a confrontation, I don't know that I could ever really handle anything. I didn't really know what worked back then. I'm guessing most people, I don't know if you're in a similar boat that I was, but I was always searching for what was the right thing, what worked. So I got into boxing after that. So when I turned 17 or 16, I started to get into boxing, thinking, Iron Mike and Holyfield and all those guys were kind of prominent back then, thinking, baddest man on the planet, all that great stuff. And, I basically outlined this whole journey in one of my articles on the website called, I think I called it originally Heavyweights Rule. So I've always been really fascinated by the heavyweight athlete. They dominate every sport. And I think most people are just kind of have some type of, there's some type of love affair, so to speak, with in general with the biggest, baddest athlete on the planet. So for me at that time, it was Mike Tyson. So I wanted to train and emulate his style, and so I got into boxing. And by the time I was 18, I got my weight down to around 195, and I have a very limited and unsuccessful bout with amateur sports in both boxing and jiu-jitsu, which I'm glad to share with you. But it at least gave me a flavor for a lot of. It started to teach me more about myself, which I guess now that I'm 42 and I look back, it's taught me a lot more, which is really what I look to the arts now for, especially jiu-jitsu. It really is something for me to open up and to explore who I am, and that's kind of what. If you think about the website, I kind of turned it from really focusing on heavyweight athletes, which I think are still the biggest and baddest and best on the planet, obviously, but turning it into what it's taught me, and that's kind of what the HW3 stands for. It's if there's anything I've learned that you achieve through the arts and that journey, it's you have to have a hard work mentality. You got to dig deep when times get tough, and that's where what I would call the heroic will component to it. And originally, I'll be completely honest, when I named the site, it was called Heavyweight Jiu-Jitsu, and it was for the heavyweights. But I kept the heavyweight in there because heavyweight also means influential. So what I'm trying to promote the idea of is that live a life that's worth following. So when I'm teaching kids now, and I'm teaching other adults, and they're just getting into this for the first time, I really want them to consider everything they do in their life to be something that's worth someone looking up to and following. So that's kind of where I landed with the HW3 thing, just to tie it all up in a button.
Nice. That's a good way to do it. So you said you would share with us your amateur boxing and jiu-jitsu career too. So what exactly did it go well? Or was it like a good way to get experience? Like which way?
Yes. You could call it whatever you want. And let me share the story with you, and then maybe you can weigh in with what you think. So I used to box in a guy's garage. Obviously, there wasn't anything local to me that were like well-run gyms. And back then, when you trained, you were lucky to find anybody that had a credible academy. There was no jiu-jitsu around. So when I first started boxing, it was just that. It was a guy's garage. He was able to get you your amateur card and get training and get local bouts scheduled. And in the Pennsylvania area, Pennsylvania had some decent Golden Glove boxers. And at the time, I forget the guy's name at this point, but the only event that I ever went to, and I trained, I'd say, and this is one of the lessons I learned. So I trained probably for about 2 to 3 months at the most. Actual sparring. Nobody in my weight class, just like, whoever's there that day, kind of sparring. And I go in, and the only people there for the bout against my weight class that day was the reigning Golden Gloves champion, which, obviously he had skill, or a guy named Robbie Holmes, who ended up being Larry Holmes' nephew.
Holy shit.
So they were the only, right. So I said, okay, well, I'm game. I was ready. Obviously I'm full of piss and vinegar. I'm 18 years old. I'm going to fight. I don't care who it is. And my coach, he pumped me up. He said, you can do this. You have a great shot. So I go in and I have the bout, and actually did well. I won the first round. Second round was probably a 10-10 type of round, and by that time, round 2, I was all the adrenaline dump had gone. I had no experience or business really being in there. I had never fought actually in a ring, so the feeling of the ring even was just crazy and it was just weird. I don't know. You have experience being in a ring, but the bounciness of the springboard. Yeah. And, I had no clue and no business being in there. So in the third round, he started to get the better of me, and he got a standing 8 count, which meant a 10-8 score. So he ended up winning on the scorecard. So not that was a bad experience. I think it taught me a lot about myself. I didn't want to quit. I didn't get knocked down. I wanted to keep doing it, but of course, I probably suffered a broken nose at the time and never got it fixed, which to this day I regret not getting it fixed because it really inhibits my ability to breathe well during training in jiu-jitsu. But you know, the only thing I can remember is going back home to my old man, and he looked at me the next day and he goes, "Hey, you should have ducked a few times." That's all he said. All right, thanks for the feedback, Pops. You're right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was not encouraged heavily to get back in the ring, so I stopped there. And then that's when I was introduced to Jiu-Jitsu somewhat after that. So when I got into Jiu-Jitsu, same kind of story. I trained for, this time it might have been worse. I trained for 2 weeks, and my instructor said, you know, with your strength alone, because I probably walked around back then at 225, mostly muscle. You know, I've always been fairly lean, but not, you know, I'm not the most svelte guy on the planet, but mostly worked out with weights all the time. So I had some good base strength. He said, yeah, you'll be able to walk in there and your strength alone should carry you. Well, this was where, in Port Clinton, Ohio, and the tournament, I don't know even, I think they just had weight classes, and to be honest, I think there were so few blue belts back then, everybody was basically in the same pot.
Yeah.
And the guy that ended up winning the entire tournament, it was actually a combination back then. It was a Kumite tournament with a Jiu-Jitsu tournament. And I remember sitting in the stands watching this guy literally shoot in on people. He had high-level wrestling, and he would just literally pick people up and slam them to the ground with impeccable technique. And that was back when slamming was not frowned upon or illegal.
Yeah.
I honestly don't even know back in '97 if the IBJJF was in existence. Do you happen to know?
Yeah, I think honestly, I thought there was a precursor to the IBJJF that was in Brazil. So it might just be, you know, hanging out in Brazil still at this point.
Yeah, and so this was just like a local tournament, but everybody kind of migrated to because it was one of the few. And so I ended up it was finally my turn, and I'm standing on the edge of the mats, and who comes next to me but that same guy? And he's like, what weight are you? And I said, I'm 212. And he said, okay. And it was only 3 people in our class. We, of course, I draw first match, and it's against him.
Oh.
So I do every rookie mistake available to you. I stand up. I start approaching him with my arms out like a dope. I didn't have contact. I couldn't even see. I was so used to training with contact lenses at the time. I popped those out. So not only could I not see, but I was giving him my arms to grab. So he decides to shoot in on me and gets low. I'd say his you know, he shot in for a belly to belly, but he was more like his head was right around my sternum. And I tried to grab his neck for a guillotine, thinking I even knew what I was doing with a guillotine. He picks me up off the floor, throws both of us, his weight and my weight, down, and of course I brace with my right hand out.
Ooh.
My elbow shoots to the back of my tricep, like midway up my arm, and major dislocation. And somehow I ended up in top, and my coach kept yelling, you're in mount, you're in mount. But I think honestly, looking back, the throw was so hard, he had almost knocked me out, because I remember seeing stars and saying, I can't move my arm. Can't move my arm. So that was my foray into amateur jiu-jitsu. I ended up on my back, getting my gi cut off me, getting taken out on a stretcher, and going to a local hospital to have it put back in place.
That's a hell of an entrance, man. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that was it. And you know, again, you know, so much more quality training now. So much more that I would do preparing wise. You know, you got to prepare for this shit, and that's what I tell anybody. Am I allowed to curse, by the way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, we pride ourselves on our bad words that we use on this podcast. You know, it's all good. Like, you know, we had Kurt Osiander on the show, and we didn't edit it, so I mean that gives you an idea of the level that we'll let go right now. So.
Oh well, there's no filter then at all, I guess.
Good.
All right. Well, I've been a Howard Stern fan for pretty much my whole life, so a lot of the words I have are 4 letters.
Good.
But I'm at work now too, and I'm trying to be a little bit, you know, professional / open to have a good interview with you. So.
Oh no, man, it's going really well, because I find it interesting. You know, I started not in the late 90s, but like, you know, kind of the mid 2000s, took a little bit of a break too, and it was still kind of the Wild West out in North Carolina. And my coach was a brown belt at the time, which, like you said, it was just kind of like, holy shit, this guy's a brown belt. Mm-hmm. Like, how the hell did I pull that? Because the majority of people coming through were either white belts or, you know, you got the occasional blue belt, and that was like, holy shit, right. Blue belt. But.
Right. Yeah, they were really like superheroes. Like I was saying before, I think at the time The guy I started training with, he ended up with his blue belt. He traveled all the way to Torrance to train under Hoyce, Gracie, or it might have been Helson at the time. I'm not sure. I think they were all out there training out of the, it wasn't the garage at the time. Maybe they actually opened up the academy. And then he ended up getting his blue belt from Steve Maxwell. I'm not sure if you've heard of Steve Maxwell. He's a pretty prominent black belt, multi-stripe black belt, multi-degree. And had a falling out with him, unfortunately, which meant he didn't continue his path to get to black belt, from what I know. But anyway, that was rare to see a blue belt back then, and it's just crazy. It was like literally those people walked on water. But now it's way more common.
Yeah,
it has to be. I think it has to be.
Like, I feel sort of accomplished as a purple belt, and everybody's like, who the fuck cares, man? You're purple belt.
Right. Purple belt's kind of like the bastard belt, isn't it?
It is.
Like, nobody really respects that. Between the blue, my instructor says blue equals black. And he's not wrong. He's right. There's elements of understanding the game that you will carry through if you stick with it from blue to black, But nobody really gives credit to that middle step of purple for some reason. But I loved it. I loved my purple belt journey. I thought it was really where I started to hone in on stuff.
Yeah, I'm having a great time with it so far. It's just like, like you said, the blue is black thing made me think of, somebody else told me that usually the people who get through blue belt, if like nothing major happens after that, they usually do get their black belts, because blue belt's usually like the break off point, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Because that's kind of an interesting discussion topic for like business owners. I wonder that blue belt retention for opening an academy and keeping one open. Like, you lose a lot of those people in the blue belt, and you see a lot of articles on them. And I'm on Reddit all the time. I don't know if you are.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I see it's the same problems, right? Everyone encounters the same stuff from white to blue. I'm having challenges here. I'm having trouble continuing training. I'm having trouble with this or that. And in a way, that's kind of what I've focused my sight on. Less technique. For now, I wanted to start with kind of my philosophy and what I've learned. But I know a lot of people are having trouble with some of the same things I encountered as I've come up. So I've really put some thought into thinking about how do I get people over that hurdle quicker without, overanalyzing it. Because, you can analyze stuff to death and just get completely stymied by sitting on the sidelines and not knowing how to get back in the academy and train. And even if it's, 1 day a week, it's better than zero, and that's been kind of honestly been prevalent in my journey. I started training in earnest a month before my first daughter was born, so that threw a wrench in the works from a training continuity standpoint. But I wouldn't I wouldn't change it. The key thing was that I just never really completely took a long layoff. I always tried, even if it was one time a month, I could only get in. It was still one time a month. It wasn't zero.
Yeah.
So I'm not like a regular trainer. I'm not a guy that gets in and has the flexibility to go 3 to 5 days a week, or even a day. Like some of these guys think that's the norm. It's not the norm. There's no way that's the norm. It's not practical or feasible unless you're a pro to do stuff like that, or you have zero responsibilities in your life. And I have many responsibilities. I can't do that as much as we would all like to, because it's an addictive sport and addictive art. You can't. It's just impossible.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who do make it work, and I am a little jealous. I'm not gonna lie that you just get to do jujitsu all day long, but it's something that they've worked out, and I think if you have that opportunity and it's something you can do, like, why the fuck not? Go for it.
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I tell all the sorry, Rob. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, you're good, man.
All the young guys that I see now when I train, and high school kids, and even 20-somethings while they're in college, I say, don't stop now. Like, keep going at it now. It's going to probably be the hardest it ever is right now for you. And if that's why you would stop, don't. Just keep grinding. And I'll tell you why. Because as soon as if you're trying to establish a career, that's going to time will no longer be your time. So you really have to get crafty about how you try to train around that, and that becomes a job in and of itself. I've finally figured it out, for myself. I've created lots of different avenues for myself to train, not just At the academy I go to, I rolled this morning in my house. I have a 15 by 15 spot of mats that I train out of, and I also train people from the town that I live in. I train them there, and I had a partner come over today and work out in the morning. So there's always a way to do it. You just have to kind of remove all those barriers to making it happen.
Yeah, there's always a way to get in there and do something with it. Like, I understand that completely. One of my friends, he was a military police officer, and his thing was, hey, I'm having a hard time getting to the gym. I said, you know what? I can kind of sneak out of, morning PT, since it's, I was teaching students at the time, like, new soldiers. And I was like, they got the other people run the PT. I'll come out there, we'll roll the mats outside and we'll roll. And it was pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
So yeah, there's always something you can do. And it's when you stop. And I mean, there's been days where I all the way to the gym, all the way, just driving. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why the hell am I doing this?
Right.
This is going to be shitty today. Then I pull up in the parking lot. I'm like, fuck, man, I really don't want to train tonight. Get in there, start running. And then before I know it, class is over. I get in my car. I'm like, no, I'm really glad I did tonight. Really glad.
I'm glad I did. That's funny you said that. Like, that's part of the journey too, right? Because there's a lot of doubt creeps in your mind when you have like a layoff of any type. Even especially when you're starting to string things together for the first time, and you're not sure. You feel like you're getting in a groove, and then all of a sudden life gets in your way, and you have a wrinkle, and then you can have a layoff, and then that self-doubt creeps in. And I've done the same thing. I've had an opening, and I go, you know what? I'm gonna, for my lunch hour today, I'm gonna go to the academy. I'm going, and I drive there, and then I go. I make an excuse to get there, and I go, you know what? I'm gonna go. I'm not going in today.
Yeah.
And I've actually, I've had enough doubt in my abilities, and I wasn't comfortable enough yet with getting. I said to myself, why the fuck am I gonna get smashed today? I know I'm going to get smashed. Do I really want that today? And then I got to go into work. And of course, I talked myself out of it. And it's happened more than one time. But if what you end up learning, obviously, is you get in and do it, and you just become that much more confident. That self-doubt starts to morph into confidence. And then that just bleeds into your life. If you keep doing it, you keep ignoring the voice in your head, you remove all the things that allow you to not train, and then just do it. It's a longer journey, and it's harder to do, but it will happen. Just do it.
Yeah, and keep moving. Like you said, that's the biggest thing. That is the biggest thing. So you talk about having to, if you can't make it to the gym, you work out at home, you bring a partner in. And I know that's something like, I see a lot on your Facebook, a lot on Instagram, stuff like that, you doing home workouts as well. Like,
yeah, for sure.
So just getting it in, like, are you more of a weight training guy? Because I know you said earlier that, you started getting into lifting weights, or do you just incorporate everything you can, or you just stick with jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, no, all of it. I mean, I think it's all, my natural attributes are probably strength-based, right? So I'm always, when I first started, I always went to my lowest common denominator, which was strength. So I got continent technique. I found a way to use my strength to get out of it. And that's, of course, I think what most people end up doing in any confrontation or anything is they go to what they're good at, attribute-wise. So for me, I'm strong, I go to that. If you're bendy and flexible like Ryan Hall, you're going to try to figure out how to get your leg in there and your arm twisted backwards and be a yoga practitioner. You're going to do that if you don't have skill. So after I finally hit blue belt, I realized, you know what, I need more than just strength. Strength's always going to be a centerpiece of my training. I just really, I get a lot out of it. It's again back to that whole the hard work thing. The iron always will win eventually. You can't outwork weights, right?
Nope.
You're going to top out at some point. You're going to lose. But that journey and figuring that out and digging deep in the human potential component of it and trying to strive to beat the weight that day, that's attractive to me. And that's kind of the way I look at jiu-jitsu too. There's always something different, a different variable that's going to beat you that day potentially. And it could just be a minor thing, but it's always something then to strive for. So both of those things together would be, I would call, the core of my existence in exploring myself. So jiu-jitsu and strength training with weights. Now, I do a lot of other stuff around it, what I would call attribute training. So things to get more explosive, to improve my anaerobic work capacity, and even my sport-specific endurance. all those things I've had to learn over the years, that you can't just squat with a barbell and then automatically be able to last grappling on the mats. It doesn't work that way. Science doesn't work that way. You have to grapple to get better at grappling.
Yep.
And you have to do workouts a certain way to get better. You have to do yoga or stretch in order to get more flexible. So what I ended up creating was, and I don't know if you've seen it, I have a product called Drill Skill, and I offer a free download for anybody who just goes to the front page of my website. I have 2 free downloads, actually. One of them is what I call the readiness block. I basically created a year-long program that's broken up into to try to work around the competitive athlete schedule. So everyone has a competition season, and what we end up doing is, I don't think there's a lot of organization or thought into putting in to put in around what the training should look like as you're approaching your competition season, during competition season, and then off season. So what I've done is created blocks of training that will allow you to explore all of those things and build upon the foundations of what you've previously put into place. Here's as scientific as I'll get today. There's a concept called the conjugate method of training. Basically means you can train for more than one physical attribute at a time and retain some of those characteristics as you go on to the next training block that you're going to explore. So, there's been a lot of debate over the years that you can't do more than one thing at a time. You can only train to be strong for one block, and then you got to drop that, and then I got to train for endurance next. Or I got to train and try to just be fast and more agile. Well, the conjugate training method allows you to work more than one attribute at a time and then retain those gains as you put something else in the priority order, and then put what I would call some of those other attributes you just worked on in what I would call a maintenance mode. So you keep them going, you just don't put them out in the highlight and make them the cornerstone of your workout. So the Drill Skill program is really centered around exploring all those physical attributes that a combat athlete would need. Explosiveness, right? You got to punch fast, you got to kick fast, you got to be able to shrimp fast, especially if you're competing. A technique alone isn't always going to win. If you're in an absolute division, you've got featherweights and heavyweights competing. The guy that's usually larger with the same skill set's typically going to win, and that might be controversial, but it's true. Weight matters, and strength matters. So. Look at is it Buchecha?
Yep.
The guy is like ridiculously fast and strong, and his technique is superior. And the reason he wins is he's just so much faster and more explosive than his counterparts. Cyborg, another guy that's just a dominant beast. Those guys strength train. It's not a joke. They're not ignoring the fact that you have to do this stuff. So basically, that's my only plug I'll give you is if you want to check it out, go to the website, sign up. All I need is an email address, and you'll get access to that. And another program I created it's just a basic strength training template. I call it Strength Training 101. Again, Rob, I see all the questions on Reddit, and I get lots of questions that are the same ones all the time. Where do I even start? What type of strength training should I do? Everybody has explored a lot of these programs. There's really good ones out there. Wendler's 531, Starting Strength. I've explored those in my past. I still use concepts from the 531. I'm also a big fan of Ross Enamite's stuff. I don't know if you're aware of him. He's got some really good stuff that he geared toward the boxing athlete, but I really like some of his material. And I've been training 20 plus years in this domain, so I've finally honed in on what works for me and what works for getting better on the mats. So all of this I can roll. I can say has helped me be more relaxed on the mats, use my strength when I need it, become more explosive. Even at 42, I feel like I'm still improving every day. Even I would kick the 20-year-old self of my my ass. I would kick my own ass pretty well right now, I think. So.
Well, that's proof that
that's
it's
pretty
working,
much my
right?
philosophy on that. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty simple too. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But also be open enough to evolve.
Yeah.
You got to be able to. You got to be able to be open enough to try new things. But strength training has been around for ages. It's way before any of us were here, and the same basic stuff still works. But a lot of people don't like to hear. They want to see what's sexy and new and what's the new cool thing to do. That's all horse shit for the most part. You got to work hard. Bottom line. It's not attractive to hear that you're going to have to put years of training in to get good. But guess what? That's how you get good on the mats. That's how you get good in the weight room. You just get in and do it every week, every day. You know, I'm talking 20 plus years of strength training here. I didn't get strong overnight. I worked out every day, you know, or every you know, I came up with a plan and did it. I didn't stop. Yeah, it just doesn't happen in a 12-week cycle. So I'm sorry if your listeners don't agree with that, but that's the truth. Bottom line.
Nope. If you got the experience, I want to hear about it. So,
yep.
So something you had brought up earlier, and now kind of hearing about how you have your programs that are available online. So you talked about back in the day, you know, you said you got all your cool kung fu gear at the back of, you know, comic books kind of and stuff. Like that was kind of what you had access to. And now that we have so much social media, so much way to reach out to each other, and so much like access to put out our own stuff as well. Do you find it sometimes, maybe on your own opinion, because you started back in 97 and seen a little bit of an evolution, I'd like to think, is it more like, is it better, or is it maybe sometimes a little overwhelming? Because sometimes I feel like the resources that are out there can be a bit overwhelming for jiu-jitsu or just anything in general, as opposed to like back in the day where it was like, you know, hey, I've got an instructor, or I can spend like $60, which, you know, was a little pricey back then, to get this complete set of VHS tapes on how to work my X guard.
Right. X guard, what was that, right?
Yeah.
That didn't exist either, I don't think, right? I think it's, you know what, now, sitting in the position I'm in now, it's awesome. For my experience, you know, I've seen it evolve, so I know I have a good idea of what's truthful and what works and where to start than someone starting out today would. And that is, so I don't think it's as advantageous for somebody who's just starting out, unless I think the best way for them to get started is, I mean, there's a couple of good ways to do it. Obviously, if you can find a top-notch instructor who has a really good lineage that goes back some time, they can give you a good grassroots type of fundamental program to start with why Jiu-Jitsu was created in the first place. So I'm a big Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fan. I'm going to admit it. You know, I love the sports side too. I'm not one of these guys that rides either side. I love the Gracie program, and this is probably the most controversial thing I'll say too. I think Henner Gracie and Hiron Gracie actually put a really good product out. The Gracie Combatives is a nice, easy to digest. Oh, I see you, man.
I can't say too much, you know.
You can say, but let me give you my 2 cents on it.
Yeah.
Before I started, there really was no curriculum to follow. It was really whatever you absorbed technique-wise. And, you know, you might start off with a half-guard position, or you might start off with, I don't know, it could be anything, really. I mean, it really kind of a loose curriculum structure. But at least what they've done is put together a set of 36 techniques that they consider to be the foundation of predominant techniques that might end up occurring in a fight. Now, that's debatable, but it at least gives them people who are brand new an avenue to explore the position dominance in jiu-jitsu. So, you know, the hierarchy of positions, what feeds into the positions from the stand-up, and how that confrontation can end. So, obviously, they give you a life cycle. Everything starts on the feet. Here's the positions it could go to, and here's how it could end. And that never existed for me when I started, and to give somebody kind of that high-level roadmap, to me, is a useful resource. So let me hear your 2 cents on it now. Go ahead.
Well, for me, you know, I will agree with that. I think Henner probably has the best marketing for a jiu-jitsu product out there for the straight curriculum stuff. I always get the little cringe and whatnot. I mean, I joke, but I came through under, you know, like Hoist, like not directly under him,
right.
but through his guys. So
right.
a blue belt's under a Hoist Gracie black belt, you know, white belt. The majority of my white belt time was under, you know, he was a Hoist Gracie brown belt. Now, obviously a Hoist Gracie black belt. And, you know, I also kind of ride this two sides. Like, yeah, I love competing. Like, I think it's great. But guess what? I'm like, I tell my guys all the time, like, you're not going to pull a guard, you know, to defend yourself ever.
Right. Right.
For me,
and if you do, you're a dope.
Yeah, you're an idiot. Like, or you better be like you and him by yourself. Like, there is no chance there's some other just like one of his buddies hanging out by yourself, no problem, and you are probably at least, I don't know, I'd say purple belt. I'd feel comfortable with that. But still, I'm lazy. I don't want to just fall on my butt on concrete. That shit hurts.
No, it fucking hurts. It's dumb too, right?
I think the big thing that maybe it's me still trying to get over it is the whole online blue belt thing. Because that is...
Well, yeah, I hear you.
I know they did get rid of it, though, didn't they? Or they just changed it to a technical blue belt, which only people in the know are going to know what that is.
Yeah, so you're right. I had heartburn with that concept too. I looked at it for what it was worth. I said, and I agree with you. Henner is an amazing marketer. Pros or cons, whatever he puts out, people respond to. So that's attention to the product. That's attention to the services that they provide, and that's all they want. I've attended some of his seminars. My instructor's lineage with Pedro Sauer and everything. He started off a heavy competition-focused school. So back when I started, it was dog eat dog, iron sharpens iron. Everybody wanted to you had to basically just survive, and that's the way you got tested. And then a lot of law enforcement folks come in there and train, and they, their life is on the line, and they train sometimes as if they're trying to subdue somebody. So you had to come up that way, and if you survived, obviously you made it to the next steps, or you went into the MMA class and all that stuff. But what ended up happening was the normal people who really want to train and could get value out of martial arts. Like, now I consider myself a working person, and I have always been. But the people that you're targeting who actually have money to keep your academy open don't want to get beat up and go to meetings with black eyes. No. The next day at work. So you have to have a more friendly curriculum, and that's what the Gracie stuff kind of does. It allows you to at least fold that into your curriculum. You could still have a fighter track and a competition track, but have something that everybody can kind of get their feet wet with. And he actually has changed into a CTC. He's the only CTC in Gaithersburg, Maryland. So he's got 400 students doing something right, Yeah. So there's something to be said from the business value of it. But I hear you, and I think to answer your question about whether they changed it, I remember seeing a video of Pedro Sauer and Hickson talking to them about it and trying to come up underneath the federation that Hickson's trying to get started. I forget what it's called. The federation he's starting, the Jiu-Jitsu Federation,
it's
global
one
or whatever.
Too, yeah.
Yeah, right. I think that I remember seeing a video where they basically got him and they agreed that it would be a technical blue belt only, but they had to go into a certified training center and roll and do all the techniques in order to actually get the blue belt. And to me, Professor Sauer's had his own curriculum for a long time, a pretty detailed one, and you could just watch a video and see how amazing his technical skill is and his knowledge. So anything he and Hickson too. I mean, Hickson obviously is legendary, and I actually attended a seminar with both of those guys a couple summers ago here in the area, and it was eye opening and one of those where you always will remember some of the things that they showed you. So if you happen to have one near you, I'd highly encourage it. And it wasn't all just magic, horse shit. The invisible jiu-jitsu, there actually is something behind it. I know it's hard to it's hard to actually see on video, but you get it when he actually shows you what he's trying to do. So I will just say that. But yeah, I think I'm with you. I hear you. But think of it from an academy owner perspective. If they're trying to keep their doors open, and you want to get money in the door and keep things going, I think you need something like that.
Oh, no. I don't disagree with that portion at all. That was the online thing. Yeah, that was the big turnoff. I don't think, they have a very long waiting period before they can spar though. I think that's I disagree with it to a point. To me, right. I have my new students, they come in, and thankfully, I have a good enough group. Not, they're all learning techno. I'm not saying they're, world champs. Where I'm saying they're like-minded people. If they want to compete, I got MMA fighters. I've got everybody. But if somebody new comes in, we have a kids class before it. One of the moms or one of the dads who've never even stepped on the mats before, except seeing their kid do it, wants to come train. They're not going to walk on the mat, get heel hooked, and then. They're down the ER. It's like, hey, No submissions. You guys are just going to work position. You're going to roll to position. And then after a few weeks, once you feel comfortable with submission, understanding that you can tap or when to tap, then we can start adding it in. And nobody is like just jumps on them and starts, trying to Steven Seagal them, breaking their necks and stuff like that. So,
I saw this in a movie. Hey, yeah.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, check this shit out. I just grab your ponytail. But yeah, you know what? You're right. And I think that's a liability thing too, right? I mean, if you let people free roll in their first classes and they get injured, now you're, as the academy owner, you're screwed. Potentially screwed. I mean, I know you sign waivers and all that shit, and you have insurance, but that's not what you want to do. You need to have a way to slow roll people in. So I for what better or worse, I think it's still something that's decent to explore.
I was gonna say, and also like another standing rule we have is just, if you're going to act like a douchebag, you get to leave. Like, if you're going to roll, like, and it's obvious that, like somebody gets in a triangle, they picks the person up and slams them. Well, guess what? You're gone. That's it. Don't ever come back.
You're gone. Yeah.
Don't ever come back.
Yeah, you got to enforce that shit up front. I mean, you have meatheads anywhere, yeah, and you still do, right? You got the guys with the egos. I want to be a fighter, or former wrestlers are come in and they want to go 100% right away, and they have a white belt on, but they're trying to heel hook you. I mean, they don't know the rules, and so they either get smashed and not like it, or they just come in and out, and they get winded because they can't do what they want to do, and they hopefully it's natural attrition.
Yeah,
And
I mean, the thing is too, like, I enjoy when you have the high level guys that come in, because it's such value added to the academy, but as long as they have the right attitude, like that's such a big thing for me. And I know, like you said, if you only go in and train once a month, and guess what, you and I have to work. We got to feed our families, and like I like living in a place where I don't have rain on me. It's just the way life is. Like, I can't show up, arm in a sling just because of practice. Competition, I could probably get away with. They're like, okay, we get it. You competed and it went a little crazy, but like if it's an every night occurrence where it's like, oh yeah, well my, can't bend my arm because I can't do that.
Right. Well, I mean, it's been a long journey for me there. I mean, when I was getting really into it, in between my blue and purple belt times, I think my purple belt, I probably had the best string together of my training life, where I was probably going 3 to 4 days a week for a good consistent year almost. And I really grew at that time, but I was so addicted to it at the time, and probably gross to disclose, but I would often go and roll at lunch, and then if the showers were occupied, I would just get my suit back on and go back to work. All disgusting. But it just goes to right. And I'm sitting in a meeting with high level clients in the federal government. I could tell you that, but I won't tell you who. Yeah. And I'm sitting there realizing that I don't have underwear on right now because they were so gross from rolling. All that's, it's a thin layer of suit pants between me and you. So you get so enraptured in the training that you've got to kind of, maybe you need to really reflect. Maybe that would have been a good day to drive away and not go train that day. But you just get so addicted to it, Rob, that you can't help yourself. So, now I wouldn't do that unless the place has an actual shower I can use. But back then, I forget about it.
Yeah, I can't see it. I can't be like, oh, so gross. I've done the same shit. So
yeah, I know you have. Yeah, don't lie. I know you have.
Oh, dude, trust me. Everything's still on the table with how disgusting I've been in my past life. Just a gnarly dude at one point as well. So
I believe it.
So, Mark, before we finish up the podcast, why don't you tell everybody once again where we can find you and where we can get all that sweet info about your lifting programs and your exercise programs?
Yeah, sure. It's www.heavyweightbjj.com. Check that out. That's the website. I'm also available if you want to on Facebook and Instagram, HW3 Jits or HW3 Jitsu. I try to use Twitter. I'm on Twitter, but it's not my favorite platform, so you can check me out there too. No big deal. And if you just want to email me directly, no big deal. It's mark@heavyweightbjj.com, and I'm glad to help.
Awesome. Mark, I really do appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me on the show about jiu-jitsu and kung fu movies and everything else, man. It was a great time.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it, and be glad to do it anytime.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Big Jiu-Jitsu Podcast, a member of the Pod Bros Podcast Network. Don't forget to go to podbros.com, find yourself another podcast you want to listen to. And don't forget to check out our sponsors, Trap and Roll Soap Company, Tape Armor, and Angry Joe Coffee, and find all of our old episodes on bjjshow.com. I'm Rob, and we'll see you guys next time.